Hi, everybody. We are back with another episode of Living Innovators. Uh, I'm Mayank Pokhana, your host and co founder at Art of Co. We run a co living incubator program for people who want to start co living spaces. You can check us out at artof.co. Today, we have with us Kyle Gaarder from USA. He has been on an interesting journey. He has been a co living resident first, had a lot of good experiences, evolved and learned from those experiences to co-found a couple of co-living startups, one in Portland, then another one in Austin, Texas, by the name of Revillage Living. Right now, he's in Europe, figuring out his next move in the co-living world, and working on a case study on how community can help create well-being in the human ecosystem. So, welcome, Kyle. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. And just one piece on that, which is a very little, like not a very known bit about my name, is that it's actually pronounced Gaarder. It looks like
Quarter.
Garter, and it trips up everybody. But it's one of those
All right.
immigrant stories. When we came over to the U.S., they spelled it
Right.
a little bit funky.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I'll
Yeah,
take care of that.
yeah.
Perfect. So in this conversation, we'll cover various aspects of your journey in the co-living ecosystem, a little bit about entrepreneurship, your key learnings from your journey, and how that can help people who are now looking to start a co-living space or already are operating a co-living space, what they can do, what they can avoid from your learnings. So that's what we will focus on during the conversation. But before we start, I have certain questions here which I've written it down for you. These are rapid fire questions, so you don't have to think too much. You just have to whatever comes first to your mind. Just tell me that. So
Cool.
I'll read down the questions from here. Would love to know what's the first thing that comes to your mind. The intention
Cool.
is to make it a little bit fun for people, and then we'll take the conversation from there.
Cool.
Cool. Perfect. So, what's the most important quality of a co-living space to succeed?
I think that the residents genuinely feel safe and connected.
Okay, interesting. In one word, what does community mean to you?
Oof. In one word,
Yes.
belonging.
Okay, interesting. Biggest challenge that you faced in building your co-living space?
Um, well, I did it solo because I had this opportunity I had like a week to decide whether to go forward with an opportunity. So that was a huge challenge doing it solo. I do not really recommend that for anyone.
Okay. One
Um,
thing that
okay, nice. Yeah, rapid fire. Let's go. Let's go.
yeah, one thing that co-living spaces need more of.
A balance of community and sustainable profit.
Okay. Your favorite event for community building in your co-living?
You said favorite event?
Yeah, that you did
Weekly
in your
weekly dinner by far. Breaking bread, man. It's his it's as old as time and it works. It's great.
perfect. What's one misconception people have about co-living?
What the heck it is. Like there's so many. I mean, I'm realizing this in Europe, like different countries I go to, there's different impressions of what co-living is. So I'd say some think it's like a nomadic 1 week, 1 month thing. Some think it's a long-term thing. Some things it's like a more like an apartment, professionalized, amenity, service oriented. A lot of
Okay.
there's just a lot of perceptions right now.
Okay. If you could start a co-living space anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Still Austin.
Cool. The most rewarding part of building a co-living community that you felt while building yours.
Um, the interactions where somebody has, you can feel the energy just like coming at them, like you can feel this like turning something on, like they're coming online, they're coming alive from this, and they're like, I don't know how to put words to it, but this is changing my life. That,
Interesting.
yeah.
One last question. If you could change one thing about the co-living industry, what would that be?
How we are all mostly, it feels like mostly operating in these silos and not sharing what's working, so that we can all thrive better and have a better, provide a better experience for residents.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. A lot of good nuggets in there. I think audience will be interested, and we'll kind of deep dive into some bits of it more during our conversation. But Kyle, take us through your journey, right? Why did you get interested in co-living? Like, how did you stumble upon co-living, right? Because I just want to understand, because you have been a member or a resident first, and then you evolved into an operator. So take us through that journey. What learnings you had? What prompted you to take those actions? It'll be interesting for us to know.
Yeah. I feel really fortunate because I feel like I kind of stumbled. I mean, however much coincidence is and however much the universe is sort of helping guide you towards where you need to go. I was working on a startup that was tangential to community. It was like van life, community, sort of similar to co-living. And, research wormhole was basically like what types of community exist in the States, and everything seemed so like it didn't, everything I was finding didn't seem to fit uh, millennials. And then that's where I bumped into co-living. I was like, what the heck is this? There's very little, there was not a lot in the States. So like you had to sort of really search. And there was this place opening up in Portland, operated by Open Door, that I just basically had a lot of energy towards. I was like, I don't know exactly why, but I'm very excited to check this out. And then everything in my life was sort of like at a transitional point, and COVID hit, and it was just like end of a relationship, end of a job, end of a, end of a time period before COVID. And it was just that perfect time to be like, all right, I'm moving across the country. I'm going to check this out. Um, it felt like at first it was the energy, and it was the like, okay, this will be really good to learn how to build a community from the inside for the startup. But then it started shifting towards like, oh, this is really good for me personally, and like this is this is invigorating for my heart and for my mind. And like there's the reason I stayed for 2 years was because personally it was a very, very rich time. Um, and so that, yeah, that was my introduction basically.
Cool. So can you take us through what would a typical week look like at Open Door?
Yeah.
Um, and what were the community aspects of experience, and what were the like, take us through that whole experience, right? As if you are living there today.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind, I arrived the summer of 2020, so COVID was like full on. We
Right.
were 10 to 20 people during that 2 year period that I was there. Um, and we were like sort of like our bubble, right? Like in COVID, right? Like that we were sort of like our interaction bubble. And so at first it was like I don't know what you call it, like summer camp or something, where it was just like all these people that are like found each other, a lot of partying, a lot of like, dance parties, a lot of just like celebration. Um, I feel like I can speak for myself, I guess. I felt very fortunate to be in that space during lockdown. Um, so that was a lot of summer 2020. Um, but the more typical day to day was that people were either working at, so there's a property where there was two buildings like this, and then a courtyard in between. Um, Very cool, custom built, like with open door, um, for co-living. Typical day, people are working either at the property or in Portland. This was in Portland, Oregon. Um, some interactions here and there. There's shared kitchens and all of the, sort of typical co-living things of shared space where you're bumping into people and having little interactions. Um, we would have so often lots of events, right? And so one of the big differentiating factors about that experience, about that model, was that we were pretty self-managed. I call it more like co-managed because Open Door was there were certain things where we were working with them, but we had a lot of like ownership over our experience, over like what the culture would be like, how to make decisions, even like who came in. Like we had some power over a lot of power over like who we accepted in, what events, the events were all like from us,
Bottom
and
up.
Open Door was there to help if needed. So there was a lot of, like we'd have monthly meetings and we'd be really engrossed in like how do we like what sort of decision making do we want and you know, how do we operate as a group of 20 people who have never lived in community before, basically none of us had. And what does that even mean? And like, how much do we want to be involved in each other's lives? And it was very rich. It was very rich. The it was like an incubator of like personal growth and culture building. And yeah, it was that model to me like is one of the more, because there's more, the residents have more power and to like self-manage. It also means it's more of a time investment, right? And so it felt
Right.
like a part-time job, like being a part and like being a part of those relationships and helping build the community. It probably wasn't like that for everybody, but I was more involved than others.
No, but
Whereas,
that's also has to do with the time that you were in that space, right? Because COVID happened, the world was shutting down at that point, and you
yeah,
had these people who you could now who would you would probably spend the whole year with. That's the visibility that we had around the world, that we had to stay wherever we were, and for the whole year we couldn't like move out freely. So I think
yeah,
that could have a lot of play, because in general, when life happens, when the world is more open, people tend to have their own routine. People tend to have certain preferences, and to create so much of a close knit community, it's probably a little bit more difficult to get everybody on the same page. But at that point of time, I think the situation made it so that it became a really, really inherent thing to do. Cool.
yes.
I think
I think that was a layer as well. Yeah,
perfect. Thanks a lot for sharing that.
yeah,
But yeah, now take us through what were your motivation for starting Revillage, right?
yeah,
I know you said earlier that it took you had a week to decide whether you want to do it or not, and then you just jumped into it. But was the motivation to create something similar to what Open Door was doing? Or was motivation to say that, okay, now this is something that I want to do for the rest of my life and I will earn my living from it? What was your motivation? Was it financial? What is something else? If you can take us through that.
yeah, absolutely. It was so I was working on another startup. I moved down to Austin. I was working on a different startup, and I was constantly like this was fresh off of the experience of living at the community. I was constantly talking about it. And you know how sometimes it takes somebody outside of yourself to be like, dude, why aren't you working in co-living? Like you literally can't stop talking about it. You clearly love it. And in one respect it was obvious. right? And I was like, I agree with you. And the other perspective was more heart-centered, and that was difficult for me to like shift over to a more heart-centered path, right? To like being led by more heart-centered. And so there was it was a process, but when I shifted over and I was like, okay, I'm gonna shift towards co-living and working in co-living, absolutely. I was like, yes, that model changed my life, and I feel like impacted, like, well, there's a lot. There's impacted positively, negatively. It was a very rich and tumultuous time, so impacted people a lot in general. But I felt like that model overall worked really well, and that if I was to try my own, try my own version of it, I would tweak some things that I felt like I was curious about. Um, but yeah, like trying to create. So my motivations really were like trying to create a similar sort of very rich experience, um, learning what it's like because I felt like this could really be a long path for me in co-living, and like it would be a really rich experience to know what it's like on the other side and to learn from that. Um, Finances were not in my radar, it now is because I was so like heart driven, passion driven that like I was dangerously close to just being bankrupt for like the entire 2 years. So now, like moving forward, I'm like, okay, I've learned from that, and like I do need to have more of that. Money is an unfortunate, but it's an important part of it, and to sustain myself, that's got to be more of the equation in the future. Um,
Correct.
yeah,
So what were some of the challenges like uh, okay, a lot of people who will listen to this conversation are the people who are either uh, interested in this ecosystem or are contemplating to start something of their own.
yeah.
And they generally would love to know what were the initial challenges when you were setting this up from a community perspective, from a marketing perspective, from operations perspective. What were the biggest challenges that you saw in the first month of just starting it out?
Yeah, getting that initial man. Okay, so first of all, finding a place where somebody's willing to basically take a risk on you and say like, yeah, you can. I mean, unless you've got a lot of
So
money,
how
a
did
lot
you
of
convince the owner? How did you
right,
convince the owner?
sort of a mixture of luck and timing, and he believed like something I I saw happening over and over again was that when I was actually coming from my heart, like doors were opening much faster, much easier than when I was previously coming from my head. And so I think there was a level of trust in like, hey, I think this guy gives a shit, and like I think he really cares, and I want to see him, um, try to do something good. But also it was good timing for him. It was like this crazy serendipity that I happened to meet this guy. His name's Martin. He runs it's called Macro House. It's like a co-living network in Austin. And it's just like the right time. He's like, I've got this property this 6 bedroom place that like literally is empty right now, and actually this could be the perfect time. Like you can take it and use it, pay month to month, and we'll just take it from there. So I mean, that was huge because uh, there's so many obstacles for on that, getting the lease or getting a chance to operate in a property to start with.
Okay,
Um,
now you got the property. You kind of had a place with you.
yeah,
What was the next thing that you did after getting the property?
yeah. Um, I had been speaking to everybody basically I saw in Austin about this. And one of the people I talked to was Sam, who was the I don't remember what's the actual title, but she basically was like the manager for a accelerator program in Austin. And she was like, interesting because the biggest pain point for me is finding a place for people coming to our accelerator, finding a place for them to live. And so we started chatting, and we basically ended up forming some sort of arrangement where it's like I have the place, and then the people in her program that they have an option to live there. And so that was a really good win-win to find people to initially populate the place, and they were there for 7 weeks, and it was like a lot of getting the kinks out of the nitty-gritty, which is really property management, right? It's like
Right.
the base of it is like just providing a safe functioning place for people. And so there was a lot of trial and error in those 7 weeks. So that was a great starting point, but then it was really like, okay, my where my heart's at in terms of what I have seen be very profound, like a profound experience, is more longer term co-living, you know. And so that's where I started shifting it to. And then that created a new set of challenges of like, okay, well, what is the model? And like, how do you market it? What are because there's a thousand decisions you got to make in terms of like what kind of co-living it's going to be. Um,
And while you were building that, did you have some kind of a support system? Like, who were you speaking to someone or people in order to take these decisions, or were you taking them on your own based on a best kind of scenario according to the information that you had?
yeah, like I said, I had like basically a week when the opportunity presented itself. I had like a week to decide, and so there was an advantage of like it makes me think of that phrase of if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, right?
Yeah.
Like I was able to like make it happen, like furnish it, like make it happen really quickly on my own. I didn't have a partner at that point. Um, so there was some advantage to that, but like um, what I would have done differently, I don't know. See, it would have been hard in a week, but ideally, right? Ideally, if there was a heart-centered co-founder and a business-centered co-founder, I think that would be a great source of support and decision making. Um, in terms of support, man, it was just like a little bit everywhere. What I really would have, and this is not just a plug for your incubator, but this is for real. That would have been amazing if there was something like a incubator, focus group, mastermind, of other people starting something, and then you sort of like have it's like a built-in, you know, um, what do you call that? Like advisory board, basically. Um, so that's awesome that y'all are doing that now. Um, yeah, eventually, I was working with you and working with some people that started like on a more routine basis, whereas like mentorship and advice. But it was really, really scrappy and fast paced at the beginning. And so there was too much of that, I think. There was too much of that, like me making decisions on my own. Um, that's sort of also a pattern in my life that I'm moving away from, of being so independent and like, doing things on my own. Yeah.
One thing that I always tell when I speak to people, and on an average, I speak to like at least 5 people every week in the co-living ecosystem, is that when you want to start a co-living space, or when you are running a co-living space, sometimes you're so into it that you just don't realize the thousand decisions that you have to make. Now, given the limitation of everybody's skills, it's very difficult to make those decisions. You make those decisions to best of your knowledge, uh, but you're not expert on everything, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what I feel, that people at some point need to realize, that it's okay to take help. It's okay to talk to people. It's okay to talk to experts who have done this, or it's okay to talk to people who have run this for a while, in
Mm.
order to get their insights. You may still end up doing what you want to do, but you need to understand the repercussions. You need to prevent and like act on certain things even before they happen, based on other people's learning, because there's no point of reinventing the wheel. If you are reinventing the wheel again and again,
Yeah.
then you're just, to yourself you may seem that you're working hard, but from a business perspective you are still running very slow, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's something that all of us need to understand. And I think kudos to you for bringing this out, that there are so many decisions that needs to be taken, and so many things that needs to fall in right place for a co-living, or for any business for that matter, to kind of become successful, right? There are 99 things that can go wrong, and you need to make sure that 100 things go right in order for you to be successful. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's something that people need to kind of learn from. Uh,
And just to
yeah,
real quick on that, one aspect that's really difficult, right? Like unless you're partnering with somebody like a co-founder at the beginning that's got a great complementary, skill
right,
set. In my situation, being a super like scrappy, like I'm taking out credit cards to, get the furniture and to like get this started, like super scrappy, right? Like in terms of my like my revenue, my not revenue, my a bit like amount of money to make this happen, right? So like it's
yeah,
hard to hire experts, you know? It's like so it's super tricky, and one thing that worked well for the most part, I did a lot of work trades, so people that wanted to live there that had super like different like marketing skill sets and stuff like that. Um, but really, it would have been like a co-founder or something that would have really been that more long-term, not expensive um,
right.
uh,
No, but that's a very interesting point
support.
for all of us to note, right? That work trades, or letting people stay for them to do work because they are expert in that particular field, can be a great way to kind of get things going at start,
Yeah,
when you want to be super frugal, and you want to make sure that your unit economics are looking good. I think
yeah,
that's a great way to kind of set things up, and at least get to a minimum viable product before you take next step or start scaling it.
yeah.
Cool. Moving on to one of the most asked questions. So we keep asking this in within our community as well. So community has been a buzzword.
Okay.
It's something that people keep talking about. It's something that has been there since we have existed, right? We are social beings. We have existed in communities. Now, what are the elements of building a successful co-living community? Like, what do you think, according to your experience of running a co-living space, of being in a co-living space? What are the elements? Because everybody can have their own way of building a community, but what are those elements that people can look for uh, when they are building this community in their co-living spaces?
Like to create a sense of community.
Or rather, to create a, like, not see, sense of community is one thing, like, but you still have to create a community. Now, so there's a very thin line of difference between sense of community and creating a community, right? For something, a group of people to be called a community, there has to be a sense of belonging, sense of community to
Yeah,
be felt, in order for them to become a part of a larger collective, so that they can contribute and make that place a lot more meaningful. So, what are the elements that you would suggest co-living founders to keep in mind while they are on their journey of building communities within their co-living spaces?
yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, community is such a is like I feel like co-living where there's such a there's so many different perceptions of what that means. So,
Right.
um, I think like big picture, the more so you have different layers, right? You have like I know my neighbors, I know my like flatmates or whatever. I socialize with my flatmates. I'm like building something with my flatmates, or like I'm, maybe having dinners or getting to know them more. I'm like having friendships with my flatmates. We're like there's a support network with with the people I live with. All the way to like chosen family, like really tight-knit, deep feelings of community. And so what to me, what affects that is, first of all, like, what kind of space do you want to create, right? Like, and uh if you have, for example, I think the more power you give over to the residents, so the more like the decisions you give to them, the more it'll go to a tighter knit, deeper experience, stronger sense of community. So, like, for example, like I said, we got to decide who, who comes in and who doesn't, right? We had some decision-making power over what new amenities or what new like improvements to the property. We got to decide, how we make decisions and what is the community about? Do we have values? Do we have a certain culture of a way of doing things? Like, what events do we want? So we had a lot of power, right? We were like probably like here. um, so I feel like that's one very important aspect. Another one is how long you're there, right? If you're there for a week, you'll have a certain sense of community. Like Sun and Co, right? They're more on the short term, but I feel like they are an example of somebody that does, from everything I've heard, like, they're able to provide a sense of community
Community.
to a decent degree, even though it's more short term. Um, but like the
But I
longer
have a
you're
one
there,
question.
yeah,
I have
yeah,
a follow-up question on that before we go ahead.
yeah,
You said we make decent, like the decision making can be decentralized to create more self-sufficient, closely knit communities. Now, one question that I often get asked on this aspect is, see, you still, as a business, you still have to make money, right?
yeah,
Now, if you have, let's say, 20 beds, you give this power to residents. Now, what starts happening is leads are coming in. If these guys, they don't want some people to come in, then the business suffers and ultimately you suffer as a business.
yeah,
That's not a good business decision. So you need to find a right balance between what makes sense from a financial perspective was to, so there has to be a decentralization to some degree,
yeah,
right? You have to take their efforts or thoughts into account, but it it the buck has to stop at some point, and then the operator needs to be in control. Otherwise, if you are running a 100 unit or a 200 unit co-living space, scaling this becomes very difficult. So what I always tell people is you start here, because if you're just opening up a co-living house like 5, 10, 15 people, you can do this and you should do this because you will understand the dynamics of community building in a lot better way. But as you start growing, you also need to adapt and evolve. If you don't, it becomes an issue in scaling and it starts affecting your unit economics, it starts affecting your profitability, and that's a huge problem, right? So what do you think? What are your thoughts on this? Because
yeah,
it'll be interesting to know, because this will go into right into the next
yeah,
question that I had for you was the sense of purpose versus profitability of a
yeah,
company, because ultimately you're running a business, right? And business is for profit, but how do you balance that sense of community using
yeah. No, no,
decentralization to
I got
profit?
you, I got you. No, that is the biggest um balancing act, in my opinion. So you're absolutely right. So I think Open Door did a great service of experimenting with a lot of different ways to have that, give as much of the power over while still making their unit economics. um, and something that I saw from being a resident was that we had like for a while we had a one veto policy. If anybody in the community didn't like the applicant, we would veto it. And so there were certain rooms that were empty for months. And that, like you said, that really impacts. I mean, co-living is not a high margin,
Yeah,
sport. It's like super thin margins. And so it's
yeah.
like that was something where I was like, fuck, that must have, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on this. I guess we can edit it out. Um, but I was like, dang, that really, like, that was that was a real sacrifice for them to give us that power. And so when I started operating, I was like, I'm going to experiment with basically what ended up being was like, you guys have the power to deny people. However, if you do and there's like a room that's going to stay open, I'm going to Airbnb it because I've got to like, you know, I personally like am this close anyways financially, and so like I can't just have a room sit there. And so there's some sort of trade-off. And that was very tricky too, because that affected the culture at the house, having Airbnb guests. That might have been a mistake. Like if we spoke to some of the residents, they might be like, nah, that's one thing I would definitely not do. Like it might not be the way to do it, but I was trying to find that balance. Um, and
Interesting.
and that the other thing about it is like, and maybe we talk about this on, maybe this is a different point, but like scaling is a big question mark to me because from, you know, there's a graveyard of operators, especially in the States, that like have been more about scaling. And I don't know if you can really like be community centered and scale, or if there needs to be a different way of doing that.
No, so I have some thoughts on that, and I've done an
Yeah.
extensive. So we also interviewed Brad
Yeah.
from Common some time back, and then
Right.
he shared his perspective. We have also interviewed Sergey from Outpost. So that episode is gonna come out in next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
What we realized by having these conversations and then studying through the learnings that we could get from this graveyard, as we call it, is that different people took, like, there are thousands of reasons a business cannot work. So it doesn't always have to be about community. So it was not about community. For Common, it was about having a very thin density, right? So they took spaces, they didn't maintain the density in a particular area, they kept expanding geographically, which made sure that their employee per resident, number of employees per resident increased, which increased their corporate cost. That was one of the things which took down their unit economics. The second angle to it was these guys had two different business models. One was a design consultancy, other one was property management, right? Where they could make 6-7%. Now, 6-7% is, you cannot create a business in a 6-7%. You need to have at least 20% margins in order to create meaningful money for you to run a co-living business. And what happened around COVID, that there was a lot of money coming in, and these early movers in the co-living space commanded a lot of technological valuation. So they kind of portrayed themselves as prop tech companies or technology companies. Like, okay, we'll have this technology which will scale, but ultimately, co-living is a human-centric business. It's a people business. It's a space business. There is a limit to the growth, right? And there has to be a method to the madness. People have realized it, right? So now there are operators like Harrington Housing, Verve Life. They are operating 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 units, right? And they're still profitable. Now, and then there is Node, right? So the evolution of business model is happening. So when we talk at scale, we have a lot of learnings of what not to do. And we, as I said at the start of this conversation, that now we have to build on it. There's no point reinventing the wheel again. Now we know what didn't work and why it didn't work. Now we have to take it from there and then kind of build over it and experiment on newer things. Right? So Verve Life spends a lot of their resources in community building. They have a lot of top-down events. They have created a platform for their residents, and they did do make a lot of concentrated effort in their community building, even at their scale. So there are things that can be done, and there are things that are definitely no. And we have learned that from these different uh, failures that have happened. Like, I don't like to call them failures. Like, it's more about learnings that have come through these people, because first
Yeah.
movers are always the highest risk takers, and
Yeah.
the most, in long term, the probability of success is always of a third mover or a fourth mover, because they build on the first
Yeah.
few failures. So I think co-living is still in early phases. We are there. We will continue to kind of grow. Uh, and as you said, like 10 minutes back, that co-living has different perceptions in different parts of the world, and people come from their point of view. They no, no, this is not co-living, this is co-living, right? Or something else is a co-living for them. Now what we need to understand, as a community, as a collective, we need to come together and create a universal definition. Today if somebody says BTR, people understand what is BTR. If somebody say PBSA, people understand what is PBSA as an
At
asset
least in
class.
Europe, yeah.
Yeah, at least there is a large part of people even in Southeast Asia, they understand.
Yeah,
But if you call a co-living, everybody has their own definition, right?
right.
So collectively, we as a community need to come together, need to talk about it a lot more, come to a point. Like, I don't think it's a one conversation thing. It's like conversation by conversation. We need everybody to move in a direction where we start thinking about those kind of things. But
Yeah.
cool. I think that's great.
One thing I want to add
Yeah,
in terms of the scaling and top down, um, I think ultimately we're sort of in the dark about what kind of experience the different models are bringing for
right,
people, right? What sort of community are these different operators providing? And so I think something like a platform, you know, could bring to light like, okay, this person who's scaling like this person who's staying small, like what is the actual impact? How is the actual sense of community for residents? My gut is that like if you're scaling, if there's some top down, that could be it could be helpful in ways, but like culture and like the culture of the place, like the identity of the community, like certain things have got to be to have a strong sense of community, certain things have got to be bottom up.
bottom up.
Like, have got to come from us. Like for example, furniture is a easy, like a low hanging fruit. Like there's certain places where like you can you can change, rearrange the furniture, you can add things, whatever. It makes you feel like you're at home, right?
Right.
Whereas certain places that are like a hotels, for example, and maybe some one side of the co-living spectrum, where it's like this is the set furniture, don't touch it, please. It's like
Right.
it's like that. Those sort of things I feel like impact that sense of like belonging, home, sense of community.
Cool. So I think we are on to the last part of our conversation. What are the trends that you are seeing, because you are very active in the ecosystem? You keep speaking to a lot of co-living entrepreneurs and other stakeholders. What are the trends that you're seeing within the co-living ecosystem? If you can share certain thoughts on that, that'll be great.
Yeah. Well, there's the trend of like uh, big scaled projects going bankrupt. And I do feel like they are, like you said, they're like they are still providing in a huge sense to the movement, wherein people
Right.
are standing and learning on, standing on their shoulders and learning from. Um, I think finally we're seeing some consolidation of the movement, and so like more technology, platforms, coliving.com, there's MapMelon, there's other platforms that are trying to solve that problem. Um, there's services like Bart over at Co-Living Ventures. I was on their call yesterday for the it's the what is it called? It's the app that basically is like bringing the co-living service providers together to share information, you know, to like post jobs, marketplace, like all these different things coming together. So that feels helpful. Like we are starting to share and work together. That feels like a pattern. Yeah, and then I agree with you. I think hopefully we're moving towards more standardization of like what it is, what it is not, so that we can, so that the customers, so that like residents can know what they're getting into, can know if it's right for them, how we describe it to people. Yeah, I mean
Perfect. Perfect.
everybody has this problem when they're like when they meet somebody, like a
Right.
family member or a friend, they're like, what's co-living? What do you do? And it's like, oh, fuck.
I still have a hard time to. I've been in this industry for last 10 years.
Yeah,
I've been an operator. I've been a tech property management software provider. I've been a consultant.
yeah,
I've worked in prop tech. I've worked
right,
on. I've consulted almost about 70 different co-living operators
yeah,
over the period of last 10 years, and it still takes me a while to like make my parents understand what I do. So I think we're in the same boat there.
yeah.
Okay, because our audience is people who are interested in co-living businesses and who want to start co-living businesses, one piece of advice that you would like to give to people who are planning to start their own co-living space from your experience?
Man, I would work for an operator first. I think that, like you said, reinventing the wheel. I think it was a great opportunity and experience, and I hope that I provided some great moments for people living there. Um, However, no need to reinvent the wheel. Like, learn from, work for an operator first. That would be a great. I think that would be the first piece that comes to my mind.
Interesting. One thing that I would like to add is like start pop-up co-living spaces. There's no like investment needed. You can host them for few weeks to a month and then see whether this is something that is your calling or that is something that you want to do for long term and then take natural steps. I think that's another thing that I would definitely want to add there. But thanks a
Hmm.
lot, Kyle. I think it was wonderful conversation. It was very interesting to know about your journey into the co-living ecosystem, what you think, how you think. I think people will find it really, really interesting, and at least it'll give them some food for thought. That's what we want to bring out through these conversations. That it's easy to say that, hey, I'll take a place and start a co-living space, but it's a very interesting journey to kind of start building it out because there's so many aspects of it that we need to think of. So thanks for sharing your insights. Thanks for taking out time and talking to us. I will put Kyle's coordinates in the description. You can connect with him on LinkedIn and talk about anything and everything co-living. It'll be wonderful. So thanks a lot for that, Kyle. And yeah, if you have any last parting thoughts that you would want to share with us.
Yeah, absolutely willing to chat with somebody, that anybody that wants to talk about co-living, especially those that are like, I really see this as a shift in, like, a part of a bigger shift in society and in housing towards a more like connected and empowered way of living. So if you want to talk about revolution and renaissance and like systematic shifts, that's reach out, especially.
One thing that I would add here, Kyle, that Kyle is working on a on research side of co-living as well. He's
Yeah,
writing a white paper on well-being in community living. He's writing an open door case study. He's been working hard on it. So if you guys are interested about that, do reach out to him. And if you want to partner with him or help him build that out, I think it'll be great to connect with him.
yeah.
Thanks a lot, Kyle. And we'll speak to you soon again.
Hey, great. Thanks, Mike.